After Easter, it says in John 20 that on the evening of that first day of the week, he showed up to his disciples. And even though the door was locked, for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and he walked through this door and he stood among them and he said, "Peace be with you." And then he showed him his hands and his side. And the disciples were overjoyed, it said, when they saw him. And again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I'm sending you." Now, that could actually be considered bad news because they had just seen Jesus brutally murdered. And now they're hearing the words, "As the Father sent me, so I am sending you." They just saw how he was ridiculed and abused by his enemies and his friends, and he said nothing to his own defense. And they hear these words, "As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you." And as he hung on the cross and his killers cast lots for his clothes at the bottom of the cross, they heard him say, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." And now they hear Jesus say, "As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you." And then they saw all this happen to a man who intended to bring only good into the world, and in return was offered up only bad and hate and ridicule and ultimately death, a horrible death. So what must they have thought when they heard these words, "As the Father has sent me to bring good into the world, so I am sending you"? I tell you, for me to go on a mission like that, I'd probably have to see the nail marks on his hands and feet, see the spear mark in his side. Because you see, the mission of Christ is not about where we go when we're dead, as Easter would suggest, but it's about how we're supposed to live while we're alive. And that life that we're called to, "as the Father has sent me," Jesus said, is a life of sacrificial giving in the midst of horrific treatment. At the end of John's gospel there, after this story, we're told that Jesus performed a lot of miracles, a lot of different stuff, and in the presence of his disciples, a lot of stuff that wasn't even recorded in this book, it says. But the stuff that was written down, it says, is so that we may believe and trust that Jesus is who he says he is. Because if we don't, we will never be able to live that life. And that it says, and that by believing, by trusting, you may have life in his name. Now again, around Easter time, this brings us to the ideas of where we go when we're dead. Life after death. But when we have life in his name, it means we are going about our life as we exist today in his name. "As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you in my name." It's about how we live today. And having life in his name is in opposition to how we tend to live our lives, which is in our own name. The problem is that living that life in his name, takes an incredible amount of courage to be able to sacrifice like that for your enemies, not just your friends and your family and people you love and your kids and your grandkids, but people who hate you. It takes a great deal of trust and belief that Jesus is who he said he is. And I think it's why when Jesus showed up, he showed them nail marks. He didn't show them a crown, all the cool stuff he got in heaven. What he showed them was what he got on earth for his sacrificial giving. He showed them the scars, the holes, the wounds. He said, this is how you will know it's me, because I am not somebody who wore a crown around you. I am somebody who gave sacrificially to my enemies of all people. So as he goes into these rooms, the first words out of his mouth repeatedly are, peace be with you. Peace be with you. Now, these words don't refer to the absence of trauma in life. The life of Christ was full of trauma. You could see it on his hands, feet, and side. You could see the trauma all over him. The peace that Christ offers is not the absence of trauma in life, but the presence of courage in the midst of trauma, which is exactly what the disciples, what all disciples are going to need when they go about to have his life in his name, as the Father had sent him, so he is sending us. And we will need whatever that thing was in the midst of the trauma that is generated when we give sacrificially. There's always been a certain brand of Jesus followers, Christianity, one that believes still in fighting our enemies and standing up for our rights. Sacrificial giving is just the opposite. Sacrificial giving says when your enemy slaps you on one side of your cheek, offer him the other one. It says if a thief takes your tunic, offer your cloak. It says if someone asks you to walk a mile, you walk two. And also it says this, take up your own cross. That sign of your own death, handed to you by people who hate you, not your friends, and follow me into a life of sacrificial giving. And all of that can make us feel like the sinners are getting away with stuff, right? Which actually is the case. With Jesus, they did get away with stuff. It's unfair. It's terribly unfair. And for some reason, we hate unfair, even though it's the first lesson we teach our kids when they're growing up is that, guess what? Life ain't fair. Yet as adults, it's the main thing we want in life is some sense of fairness. And Jesus said, life in my name is not fair. It's not fair. Do it anyway. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. He offers them peace, courage, not to fight, not to get even, not to stand up for yourself, not to defend yourself, but the courage to give to those who are trying to take from you. Jesus performed a lot of miracles, signs and presences of the people that weren't even recorded in the book of John. And John says all this stuff has been recorded so that you may trust that Jesus is who he says he is, that he is the Son of God, it says, and that by trusting and believing in him, you may have this life. You may have life in his name, a life of sacrificial giving. Not after you're dead, but while you are alive today.